Welcome to Weekly News Review, program where we look at the events of last week in Europe and beyond. I'm your host Martin. Today we are covering the week of 2nd to 8th of February 2026. And let's look what happened out there. Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt fully reopened on Monday. However, much less people crossed than expected. Originally, 50 people were supposed to return to Gaza, but only 12 cleared the Israeli security control. The rest of the 38 people approved by the Egyptian did not clear the security and are waiting on the crossing. 15 people were allowed to leave Gaza for Egypt. 5 patients and 2 family members as an escort. First day. The crossing stayed open even after Israeli shelling in northern Gaza on Wednesday morning, which was a reaction to a shooting attack on Israeli troops the night before. France approved budget for 2026. Following 2 months of fierce debate and 2 non-confidence votes, France finally passed the budget for 2026 on Monday. This required a compromise with the socialist members of parliament. The government of Prime Minister Sebastian Lecornu had to scrap the pension reform, especially the increase of retirement age to 64 years, as well as any increase of taxes for individuals or businesses. The budget counts with deficit of 5% despite these changes, what investors see as a sign of renewed stability. Let's turn to Ukraine. Early on Tuesday morning, number of Ukrainian cities, including the capital Kiev, were under attack. In Kiev and Kharkiv, energy infrastructure was damaged. This ended the President Trump's required moratorium on attacks on energy infrastructure. In Kharkiv, thermal plant was hit, what left 820 apartment buildings without heating in freezing temperature below -10 degrees Celsius. Later on Tuesday, Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky stated the Russian attack on Ukraine's energy sector are total disregard to US peace efforts. Despite this, another trilateral meeting took place in Abu Dhabi this Wednesday and Thursday between US, Ukraine and Russia. The result of these talks is agreement of exchange of 314 prisoners of war or PMWs in upcoming 5 months. Both delegations stated is it a lot of work to be done on the peace agreement. The negotiations will continue in upcoming weeks. It is essential to state that similar prisoner exchanges occurred in the past, but did not lead to end of the conflict. And next news doesn't help the peace negotiation either. On Friday morning, there was attempted assassination of deputy head of Russian military intelligence, the GRU. Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev. However, this attempt was unsuccessful, and following a surgery, the general regained consciousness on Sunday. The Russian authorities blamed Ukrainian Secret Service from the beginning, and were already able to arrest 2 accomplices in Russia, and the main suspect, named as Lubomir Korba, was apprehended in Dubai and extradited to Russia. Korba was born in Thermopyl region in Soviet Ukraine in the 1960s. The Swiss arrests of the suspects and recovery of the general might indicate that this might have been a Russian staged provocation to depict Ukraine as a warmonger. However, this does not mean Ukraine did not have motivations to assassinate General Alexeyev. since he was taking part in paramilitary operation in Donbass and Luhansk region. We will stay with topics related to Ukraine, but we will move west. On Monday, the German customs agents raided a network of companies in Lübeck in cooperation with BND, that stands for the Bundesnachrichtendienst, the German Foreign Intelligence Service. The network allegedly transferred 30 million of sanctioned goods to Russia. These goods are supposed to include electronics and so-called dual-use goods. At least some of these goods ended in the hands of Russian arm manufacturers. What constitutes breach of sanctions independently of the type of goods provided? The sales were camouflaged as sales to number of shell companies in and outside European Union. The German prosecution stated that the network was controlled by Russian military intelligence. Right now, it's not clear if future raids are expected. We will stay with Germany a bit longer, since Germany is planning to go to space, at least with their planned military spending of 35 million euros on spy satellite, offensive lasers, and space planes. These are planes which can fly both in Earth atmosphere and in space. Germany will build an encrypted military constellation of more than 100 satellites, known as SATCOM-4 stage, over the next few years. The head of Germany's Space Command, Michael Traut, told Reuters on the sidelines of a space event ahead of the Singapore Air Show. In addition, EU is planning to create alternative to Elon Musk's Starlink. All of this occurs as a reaction to Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Let's move further west to the United States, which were part of two significant diplomatic developments this week. First, on Thursday, US President Donald Trump rejected offer from Russian President to extend the New START agreement by 1 year. START sets limit on strategic nuclear weapon deployment and defines mechanism of control as well. Its history goes over half-century deep into the Cold War. Originally, the START was due to expire in 2021, when it was one time extended by the US President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart for 5 years. President Trump rejected the offer based on reasoning that new, technically updated agreement should be reached. However, in current geopolitical climate, this might be challenging. There is fear of renewed nuclear arms race, as well as that US will be able to deploy enough nuclear weapons to deter both Russia and China. China is not part of the agreement and is not currently willing to participate in any START negotiation. However, it is essential to state that stockpiles of Chinese strategic nuclear weapons is much smaller than Russia or United States. To end this on positive side, both parties state interest in diplomatic solution. Second, initial talks between US and Iran took place in Oman on Friday. The talks were moderated by Omani officials, and at the end both parties stated that the talks were good. However, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Arqoushi stated that there won't be any negotiation under threat and pressure. By threat, he meant the US build-up in the region. Iran showed willingness to negotiate its nuclear program and handing over 400 kilograms of high-enriched uranium in exchange for lifting of sanctions reimposed in 2018. However, clearly stated that any other topics are off the table. This referred to US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's statement on Wednesday. that the US would like to discuss Iranian ballistic missile program, support for armed groups around the region, and the treatment of their own people as well. It is more than possible that the branding the talks as constructive by both sides should only dissolve the fear of war in the region. Another unstable region is Sub-Saharan and West Africa, where violence erupted this week. Troops were deployed in Kayama in Kwara State in west of Nigeria, about 50 kilometers east from Benin border. This was government reaction to massacre of 170 civilians by Islamic militants in nearby village of Voro, 60 kilometers to the north on Tuesday. There were worries the militant might continue with their attacks to the south. There was separate attack in the north of Nigeria, in Katsina state, where 21 were killed the same day. On Saturday, three were killed and numbers were abducted in North Nigeria's Kaduna state. One of the kidnaps was identified as Catholic priest. Pope Leo XIV appealed to the Nigerian authorities to deal with the worsening situation in the country. Moving southeast, in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, clashes between the government forces and rebels intensified. The rebels from Congo River Alliance, a group allying a number of rebel groups formed just prior to DRC's elections in 2023, it's also known as under its French acronym AFC, contest the internationally recognized government of Democratic Republic Congo in armed struggle. Conflict intensity fluctuates with no clear vision of peace. Let us end on a more peaceful note. The 25th Winter Olympic Games started on Friday, 6th of February in Milan. These Winter Olympics Games are also known as Milano Cortina 2026. Games will be attended by 2,871 athletes from 92 countries. They will be competing in 116 events in 16 disciplines in 8 sports. Events are distributed over a number of locations in northern Italy. The closing ceremony will take place in Verona on the 22nd of February. So if you are a winter sports fan, you have something to look for in upcoming 2 weeks. We are coming to end of our program, point news. News in one sentence. Poland and South Korea had bilateral talk on security on Monday in Warsaw. Bad Bunny wins top Grammy Prize for his album Debí tirar más fotos, which is first Spanish language album to win the top prize. First time in 2 years, Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd resumed their voyages through Red Sea under a naval escort, which were stopped due to Houthi attacks. Moroccan Interior Ministry announced on Thursday it is evacuating 143,000 people from northwest part of the country due to expected floods caused by the heavy rains in the area. Activists behind the Global Samud Flotilla, which organization which tried to breach Gaza naval blockade last year, start to organize second, bigger attempt to bring aid to Gaza. This week was very volatile, both in the commodity and stock markets, where drops in prices occur. You listen to weekly news review for the week of 2nd to 8th of February 2026. Thank you for listening, and next review will be ready in a week. Goodbye.